In SketchUp, styles allow you to change the look of your modeling environment. The color of the background here, the weight of the lines, the transparency of the parts, things like that. So if you have chosen the woodworking template, you will be using this woodworking style. So styles is found in the default tray. And within here, under default styles, you have about a dozen different options. The one that you'll typically be using is probably woodworking. I find this is kind of easy on the eyes in terms of the brightness of the screen. The other ones that I'll use are construction documentation and shaded. So construction documentation is a bit basically the same as woodworking, except the background is different. I find the construction documentation a little bit bright just to look at for a long period of time, so the woodworking style is better for just general modeling. But I create a lot of images that I use in handouts, and for those I want the white background, so I will switch to this construction documentation style if I'm going to export a 2D drawing. The shaded style comes in handy if I want to do some troubleshooting. So note that in this style, all of the line weights are the same. If I go back to construction documentation, the back edges are the profile of the part, the outer lines in the view. The lines are a little heavier, but that can sometimes hide errors where you maybe have a double line on something. And if I switch to shaded, it's a little easier to tell if you have a problem with something. There's a bunch of other options here that may or may not be helpful. Architectural looks similar, but if I orbit a little bit here, you can see because we might now be modeling something outdoors, it actually has a horizon. Various other ones, the default style also has a horizon. Landscape architecture gives you a green foreground and a blue sky. So in general, though, you're going to probably want to use woodworking style, perhaps shaded for troubleshooting. And like I said, if you're exporting models or drawings, you might want to use the construction documentation style. If you wanted to edit one of these styles, you can come up to this Edit tab. And in this screen, if I start at the beginning, this screen you can use to edit edges. So notice if I turn off and on the edges, now I'm seeing or not seeing these front lines here, but I still see the profile, the outer part. So if I can turn off both of those, now I get no lines at all. We'll turn those back on. The back edges, if I turn that off and on, it just shows me a dashed line to kind of give me a sense of what's going on in the background there. Depth Q makes lines that are closer to you heavier. Extension, if I bump that up, we don't really see it too much right now. There we go. That makes it look more like a pencil drawing where you've sketched something and you've drawn the lines a little long and then erased them later, but didn't erase all the way to the corner. Endpoints just makes the endpoints like there's a little bit of a tracing right over those. Kind of darkens things up at the corners a little bit. But once again, kind of a pencil drawing technique. And jitter really makes it look like a pencil drawing where you have sketched over some lines heavier than others. The next part here is faces. So here we've got the front and back colors of the faces, whether or not we get some transparency, and that's going to affect us when we go to X-ray. So here I can turn, I believe, turn that. I guess that doesn't affect that. Notice if I switch from faster, which is the default view here, to nicer, you now have some control over how transparent the faces are. So you can actually tweak that if you wanted to. You can bump that as high as 80%. Typically, that's just set it faster. A couple other options here for styles. If I go to this next one, background and orbit here, now you can see I can turn the sky off and on, turn the ground off and on. So that, of course, goes more with the architectural styles. The next thing here is a watermark setting. So there might be an occasion where you want to put a watermark on your drawing. So the way to do that would be to hit this plus sign. And I'm just going to bring in a picture of a table here. And so the first way to set this up, it just comes in as a background. Now, obviously, if I'm going to be modeling, I don't want that there. Typically, a watermark might be a logo or something like that. But let's say I wanted something to show up in a corner up here as I'm modeling. So I can click Next here. I can have some other options here, which I would typically not use. So right now, this is set to stretch to fit the screen. So it's big. I probably would want to position this, and here you can tell it where you want it. So I'm going to put it up in the upper left-hand corner. So there you can see that might be helpful in certain situations if you want to constantly see something in your model no matter where you're at. Here I can change the scale of it, make it bigger or smaller. So we'll just leave it about like that. Now when I click Finish, that's going to be there no matter what. So that may not be helpful depending on what you're doing. And then last here, you get some other options, some related to match photo, some various other things that you might want to explore. I tend to not use any of those. So that pretty much covers styles. Can be helpful, but in general, you're probably just going to stick with the normal ones and not mess with this too much.